Sam Wilson here, Sam's Antique Motors, the Resto-Rat. Doing a little video today on how to rebuild these vent windows. This is a real pain in the ass, and it costs about as much for the parts as it does to actually buy the vent windows new, but they don't make them in black. So I'm gonna have to paint these like they were standard on the vehicle, so I'm gonna go ahead and rebuild them. And I'm just gonna walk through how to make that happen. I've already got one of these torn down. It's pretty easy to tear them down. It's not so easy to put them back. If you do this, you got to really take a lot of good pictures of how these little joints go together and how this overlaps on the outside of this under bar right here. Also got to pay attention to the orientation of all these pieces. So this thing is on the outside. This is flipped around on the inside. Got to really pay attention because it's kind of difficult to get these back together right if you don't. So, you know, the deal's on the inside. Here's this, and note that that is pointing down so that it mounts to the inside of the door. And this has a little locking nut on it, a nut with a locking washer, and then it goes up, and then there's two little fiber washers. Then there's another fiber washer here, and then this has a little slot in it that is what makes this window lock when you open it up, and only goes so far. So this thing has this locking piece, kind of the flat side of this washer here on the back side of this clip. And what that makes this thing do is when you open this window, let's see if it'll even open. When this opens up, as it turns, this piece right here locks up against this tab and keeps it from going too far. So you got to kind of pay attention to all those pieces. The other thing, you can see this is just completely trashed, is in order to redo this, you got to cut this felt out, and then you got to take these rivets out. So there's two rivets right here. There's two rivets right up here at the top, only one showing, the other's in that rubber, underneath that rubber gasket. And you got to cut this rivet out in order to get the glass out. Then there's four rivets, kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, that hold this little, this is the sealing strip off the other one, but you can see there's four little rivets here, and those go through this channel and hold this black channel, hold this rubber, and hold this together. I've had a really hard time getting these rivets in because one of these rivets is up where you can't really get a punch directly on it. You can see you can get a punch on one, but you can't hardly get a punch on the other. So I may invent a tool or something to do that. The other challenge I've had is getting this gasket in here. I've done about 6 pairs of these, but the other challenge is getting this gasket pulled way up in the nose of this channel. And that's a real pain in the ass. So I'm gonna work on some other techniques to do that, including a can of silicone spray, which I've used in the past. So right now I'm gonna go ahead and take this thing apart, and I'm gonna start by grinding out these rivets, and I'm gonna grind out these rivets, and I'm gonna grind out these rivets, and I'm gonna grind out this rivet, and I'm gonna do all that from the inside. So I'm gonna scrape this felt out. You kind of got to cut it out and tear it out and scrape it out. So I'm gonna get this out, and I'm gonna do these from the inside very gently with a die grinder with a cutting wheel on it, so I can do it really, really carefully. Normally you would cut the rivet out from the part where you bend it over. But in this particular case, you can't get a cutting wheel in here unless you used a die grinder like this and came in from the side. So it's just easier to cut them out from the other side. So I got this nut off, and you can see there's this little locking ring, and then you got this spring. I bought new ones of these mainly because they'd just be coated, but there's no real reason to do that. And then there's not one but two of these little fiber. Well, actually one of those is metal and the other one is fiber. So you can see that one is just a Bakelite fiber. And then in order to get this out, I'm gonna have to grind this rivet out. Okay, you see I did that kind of gently so that I can just push that little pin, that little rivet right out of there. All right, once you grind that out, you see that this flat part goes to the pointy part of the window, and then you got this little, again, a Bakelite washer in between that and this little clip. Then to get this handle off, there's this little bitty tiny roll pin that goes in this shaft. So I have a little tiny punch that I punch this off. Once you do that, this will just slide off. And then there's a little spring washer, goes next. And then you have to get a 9/16 wrench. And once you do that, this little nut will just, it's a back off of here. That lifts off, and then there's another little plastic washer that goes there. And then once you pop this thing out, there's a washer on this thing that has this locating pin. And this locating pin in this case was to the bottom of this hole. So it's pushing this up to the top of the hole. So now I'll pull the glass out and we'll clean up this frame. Now I can't say anything about how to get this glass out of here without breaking it. So I started with just edging this up. I cut with a razor blade along this edge, and I just nudge this a little bit, and I nudge this at the tip a little bit. And if you get it worked out enough, then you can get it to where you can just take a gentle screwdriver and just kind of work this out. I'm gonna replace these. This is already a replacement glass. The other one is properly date coated. This one is not, but you can see the date. I don't know if you can see it, sort of. Date coat on this is been replaced. The date coat on this one is the original glass. So you can tell this is, you can't really see it in the video. This is an AS2.AX7, and I believe that date codes to 1972. So I checked it once before. All right, you can see these two little rivets. I'm gonna grind these out from the inside. All right, now I got all these little rivets ground out from the inside very gently to where I just got the head scraped off where it was smooth. Now I'm gonna drive those out. Okay, I drove these rivets out, and one of the things to kind of notice is that this rubber actually goes up underneath this other piece of rubber. So you can see that this is sitting right up underneath. You got to kind of slide it out from underneath that. There's a little rubber piece here that's got to go down underneath that, and if that doesn't go underneath it, it won't seal right. And the same thing up on the front of this. When this comes out of here, there's this little piece here, and it goes up underneath this strip right here. So that's really tough to make all that happen, but we'll work on that here in a minute. All right, I got these all sandblasted up, with glass bead, and I took this strip and I put it on the buffer and I just polished this edge. So I got this edge all nice and shiny. This is actually a piece of stainless clad onto here. So I got that nice and shiny, and now we're gonna send it over to the paint department. Well, it's the following week, and got everything back from the paint shop, which is right over there. First thing I did was just sort everything out to make sure I had everything on the left hand together with the left hand, and right hand, the right hand. Got all my new parts together, and so I'm gonna see if I can't get this glass bedded into the window frame, and then we're gonna work on putting the seal in. All right, I had a little bit of learning curve on the first one, but it's not too bad. First thing I did was just make sure I had the right glass so that the date coat reads on the correct side. So this is the outside, so you want the date code to read from the outside. And then the next thing I did is I have a can of silicone spray here, is just shoot a little silicone spray in there so that this will slide down in there. And I just kind of centered up this setting tape. Doesn't take any glue, it just friction fit in there. So I just got this kind of lined up on this groove. A little bit of an artful thing. Maybe a better way to do this, but this is what I did. And then I've centered up this glass on this setting tape. Kind of made sure my tape was centered all the way across, and then I just pushed it in and pushed it in. Man, did that go a lot smoother than the first one. So the real trick here is to put that silicone spray in there first, because I mean that just jumped in there like it was supposed to, and that's perfect in the groove, exactly where it needs to be. So and the tape actually even went in centered, so there's no trimming to the tape anyway, all the way around it. Just a little piece right down here in the very corner, and I got a really nice sharp X-Acto, and I kind of angle it back into the corner so that it'll trim out. But you can tell that's just a hairline piece of trim in order to get this right to the edge of the track for it. Okay, so then I just trim off the ends here of this. Like I say, that went a lot smoother. The first one took me a fair amount of grunting and groaning to get it pushed in, but this one went in nice and smoothly. So we'll trim this off, and then we'll call that part done. I will say that you can buy these vents, and if you buy them, you're going to spend in labor and material about the same whether you buy them or build them, but you can't buy them in black. They only come as a replacement vent in chrome. So this vehicle doesn't take a chrome vent, so we really had no choice but to rebuild them. And I don't remember where this came from. Looks like LMC. So I bought the little new latch, and comparing this to the original one, I don't see really any differences in quality, nice quality. I did have to drill out the little pin for the locking pin that holds it on, but other than that, all's good. So if this is the outside over there, and I'm gonna put this in here like so, and this has got an elliptical piece here, so the elliptical piece goes to the bottom. So we're gonna put that on there. We're gonna put this little plastic washer on the top of that. We're gonna come in here and secure this. Takes a little 9/16 wrench. Not a half, but 9/16. And I don't know how tight to tell you to tighten this. I mean, I just kind of snugged it up where it was nice and firm. It's got rubber gasket in there, so obviously you don't want to tighten it so much it breaks the glass. And then this little handle should go where it's clear of the door, and then more or less perpendicular with that. So if you got all that right, you should be good. So there's a little spring washer that then sits on top of it, and then this little roll pin goes in there. Now on the other one, I had to clean out this pin, so I just took a drill and just did a light amount of cleanup, just enough to kind of remove the excess chrome that's in there. And then I took a pair of dikes and I got this thing started in this hole. This one actually went in just a little bit easier than the other side. The other side was pretty tough to get in. So once you do that, then you push this down to where it hits in the lock-in place. You got to put a little bit of pressure with your hand to squeeze that washer. And like I say, this one just slid right in there nice and neat. The other one wouldn't go in. So once you push that in there, then that pin locks this handle in where it goes. So this is now pretty much ready to go back in the frame. So we'll move on to the next piece, which I'm gonna set this over here with its matching components so we know which one that is. And then the next thing is to get the gasket into this thing. And I've had a real time of getting this gasket in here before. Like I say, I've done, I don't know how many of these I've done, maybe 6 sets at least probably. So in the gasket set, there's the strip, and this is really kind of bent up, so we're going to work on kind of straightening that. There's a little metal strip in there that's holds the rivets in, so we're going to get this kind of as straight as we can. And I think there's going to be a left and right to both of these. Those holes do line up that way, and they line up this way, but this definitely has a left and a right, because this is the sealing strip that goes when you pull the window in and latch it. It latches up against this seal, so you got to make sure you get those matched up to be the correct ones. So I'm going to put those there, and then this strip here also has a left and a right. And the real difference is this piece right here is, it's probably hard to see, but there's a piece here that goes in. So, and then you got this piece up here which goes around this bracket. And I may have to look at the photos to make sure I get this squared away straight as well. No, it's going to be kind of obvious because this has to sit on this. This has to go in this little lip right here. And this piece up here has got to stretch up over the top of this piece right here, because this little bracket up at the top of this has to go in there like so to get fitted in there. So I've had a real heck of a time doing this before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the silicone spray out, and I'm going to spray this thing really good. I've got this set up over the top of this. This one just snaps in. This one doesn't have to clip over, so I'm going to spray this real good and see what I can do to get this pushed up in there. Probably going to have to go get my little plastic windshield tool to get it pushed up in there. But the main thing is this piece up here in the nose has to be seated up in there, and that silicone spray just just really let that just jump in there where it's going to go. So my word to the wise here is do not attempt this without getting that silicone. This is just Max 8300 silicone spray, because it allowed this first piece, and I mean I've used this with vice grips and everything else trying to get that pushed up in there, and it's usually murderous to make that happen. But this one is really just snapping right into place because I put that spray on there. I watched another video just to see how other people have done this, anticipating what a pain in the ass this was going to be. And you know, the one I watched, the guy said, yeah, and he cut the video when he did this part, and it took him about, he said when he came back on it, you know, he spent about 30 minutes futzing with it. And I think that's pretty typical. So this one, like I say, with that silicone spray, I'm gonna actually put a little more in here. This silicone spray does kind of evaporate. I mean, I don't know if you could see it, but once I sprayed that on there, it just jumped in that slot. So you really want to get this. It's not quite in there, but see, I may have to go get one. Here we go. That's it. And you kind of want to be a little bit gentle because you don't want to bend this frame. I don't know if they make these frames or not, but you really don't want to bend that frame. So that's got this up over the top of it like it's supposed to go, and everything snapped in. So the real trick to this is getting that silicone spray and spraying that thing really good. I've seen people using Windex and all kinds of other lubricants to make it happen. You don't want to put oil on it because the oil will get soaked up in the gasket and the neoprene and expand. So you don't want to do oil or WD-40 or penetrating lube or anything like that. So that's pretty much got that the way it's supposed to be. So now we're going to work on figuring out how to rivet the little sealing strip in there and get that put back together. All right, now I'm ready to rivet in this little rubber strip. So again, you got to make sure that this rubber strip's got the right edge here. I have a piece of metal that I milled off right here. So I got it, and I got it slightly cocked so that it holds it square in the deal. And I got another stick over here because I'm working by myself to be able to hold this thing up. So I also have this handy dandy tool. Comes with a rivet tool, but this one, the neck is wore down. I've had this since I was about 13 years old, and you really need one with a really small neck, because in order to get this in here correctly, you got to get it right up against this rubber, and the big fat one is not going to get a good edge that comes with the rivets. So you may need to take one of these and grind it or file it down to get nice and round in order to get up in there. But so now I'm going to take this and tap these. I've already put this rivet in here, so I got the rivet sitting in there nice and flat. So I'm going to center it up on this little punch block. So now we're just going to tap that down. So we didn't want to do that. Make sure my rivet's showing through. Really got to get these rivet heads pushed down nice and flat in there, because that's where the window closes. So if it's not, it'll scrape the window. I saw some guys on YouTube using pop rivet guns to do this. But a pop rivet gun, that doesn't make much sense to me, because if this is not smooth on this side, the window is going to scrape on it, and you can't have it protruding on the other side, because that's where the window felt is going to go. So I think that's got that nice and tight. So I think we're good on that front. The next challenge is that when this other piece comes in here for the actual window, it's got to slip underneath this piece right here. So this one I think I can slide underneath and then put the rivet on. This one over here, once I put this rivet in here, it's right close to the end. So I don't think I'm going to really be able to move this up. So I'm going to see if I can actually flip the rivet over, and maybe I can just back it from this side. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to solve this problem. I've done this before and I wound up just cutting the web out, but I really don't want to cut the web out. So I'm going to see if I can get the other one in here, see if there's enough room to get the punch driven down in there. If not, I just may have to try to lift this up with a screwdriver after I get it done and sneak that in. All right, I put some silicone spray in there to lube this up, to let this slide up in there. And then I put a little bitty tiny nut and bolt right here just as a temporary. I'm gonna replace this with a rivet, but that held this down on here. And I did the same thing up here. I put some silicone spray, I worked that up in there where it's supposed to go, and I put a little bitty tiny nut and bolt up here. So now I'm gonna come in and rivet these, the two more rivets that are right in here. That'll tighten this up. I think I can get my punch up in this tight corner, and then I'll come replace those rivets. All right, I got this seated up in there where I like it. I got this thing tapped down in there where I think it's kind of nice. I'm gonna take a little bit bigger punch and just kind of clean these up. So that they're nice and flat up in this rubber. This is just a flat punch. I'm just using to kind of further peen that rivet over. Yeah, so it's nice and tight, so it's flush in there. I'm gonna move this down a little bit. I'll just flip it around here and do the same thing on this next one here. Yeah, that's got it nice and recessed in there. You don't want that popping up enough that it hits the glass. It's got that one cleaned over nicely. I've seen it, some of these people were talking about using pop rivet guns, but again, you can't really use a pop rivet gun to do this. You're gonna have to do this the correct way and get this all seated in there like it's supposed to be. Pop rivet gun is just not gonna work here. You're gonna have to get this rivet up in there where it goes. This is gonna be the tough one because this is right in here in this top corner, but I don't know any other way to do that. I might toy with seeing if I can, and there's just not going to be a way to move this out and get that riveted in there. So we're just going to have to go in there and do that gently. I got those in there nicely. We're just going to have to get a rivet in there. And I don't know how they would have done this from the factory. They must have had some kind of machine that went in there and peened this over, reached up in there and grabbed it and peened it down. I think if I do another one of these, I'm gonna make some device to be able to get up in there. And also be really nice if you had someone helping to hold. this is kind of a four-handed operation. When I've done this in the past, I have made sure I had a wife or a first wife or a girlfriend or something to hold this. So it's just not really getting up in there tight enough to peen this. I just don't know any way to do this. I'm going to try to take this off and see if I can peen it and then get it back on, but this may not work very well. Well, if I loosen that up, that lets me move that over a little bit. Still keep it in the notch. Well, that seemed to work a little bit. And I think that's got it. Okay, so now I've got my frame rivet where it needs to go. That's sitting down on there nice and firmly. And you got to sneak this in behind this little rubber piece. This again, I don't know what they did in the factory to do this. Okay, enough of this nonsense. Might I recommend a clamp? Okay, I got that handled. So now let's go back to what we were doing here. See if we can get this little rivet tightened up nicely. I really can't even see it. All right, that sounded like it got seated down on there. Yeah, okay. I don't think you're gonna be able to see it, but it's down in there, it's nice and smooth, and this nut is actually loose now where it was tight, so I know I've got it pushed down on there where it goes. So now I'm gonna take this bolt, temporary bolt out. I'm not sure if you call that a bolt or not when it's that small, but that one out. Put a rivet in there. Okay. Now this is one of 2 rivets out of about 8 that you can actually use the supplied punch for. And that's going down there nicely. Kind of want to just do it a little bit and check it, make sure it's flaring out evenly, which it's doing. Yep, that looks pretty good. And I'm going to take my just flat punch. And now that's got that super nice and tight. Looks pretty good. Got our rubber gasket in there, managed to get that underneath it. And so now we're going to just flip this around and do this other side the same way. So I got that on there. This one's going to be a little tough to get punch up in there as well. I think this is the only other one that you can actually use the provided punch, and I'm not sure it's going to work. All right, that's gotten relatively tight there. Now I'm going to take this one back out. I saw this trick of using this little bolt to hold this in on a fellow YouTuber. Unfortunately, I didn't notice which one it was to give credit, but that's actually works out pretty well to make that happen, bring this together. All right, I didn't actually capture that on video, but I put a pop rivet on this top one. I don't frankly see why you couldn't put a pop rivet on all of these 4 right here. In fact, I think that's what I'm going to do on the next one, because it just makes a much stronger deal. And I think that's the way to go on these. You can't do it on these because they will get in the way of the glass, but you can definitely do it on these. Okay, we got that pop riveted in. I'm really happy with this. This all fits nice. All the gaskets are in there properly. So we got 2 more sets of rivets to do. We're going to go ahead and glue this strip back in here so that we can put these 2 rivets that hold this bracket through the weather stripping to hold it. And then we're going to put the window glass back in, and then we'll have to rivet this up right here. So we'll move on to that. Okay, with that, I got this all riveted in. I riveted this piece on here. Last thing to do here is just to insert this, and you have to kind of do this all at one step here, because you got to get this in the hole. I think you have to bring it in like this. Yeah, so you got to kind of bring it in like this, and as it comes in, you got to put this kind of funky shaped D-washer in here with the flat side going towards the point. This is what keeps the vent wing window from going too far. Then you got one of these little Bakelite washers. Goes in there. And then as it penetrates, you got another Bakelite washer. Then you got a round washer with this special cutout in it. That slides up on there. Then you got the spring. And you got this little locking tab washer. And then you got to have a nut, which I replaced with a stainless steel nut so it won't rust on the bottom of this thing for the next guy in another 50 years. That rebuilds this vent wing. I just get this kind of close. I don't really go whole hog with this. You need about a 1/4 of an inch showing to get the right tension, but I'm just trying to get it kind of close. And then I come in here and I get this window set up in there where it goes. Which that all looks pretty good there. And then I clip the window in so it holds it nice. And then what you want to do is get this rivet. Again, this is a special rivet. It's got a head with a shoulder and then the pin, and that comes in from the top. So you're gonna have to get that. I may have to open it back up to get it aligned into it. Push this up through that hole, through the other hole. It looks like it feels like if it's slightly open, it helps it a little bit. There we go. So once you kind of get it pushed up in there where it goes, then I think it's a little bit helpful to go ahead and tighten this thing down some more to bring tension and pull this down. There we go. And once you get that back in there, kind of where it really goes, then I think it's best to go ahead and secure that. And that kind of holds it up where it needs to go. Now I'm going to just go over to my vise and I'm going to peen this little rivet back over. The other one I went ahead and taped this off because I don't want to scratch this, holding it up next to the vise. So I just taped all this just to give a little bit of protection. All right, now I'm gonna go over and peen this down, and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, now that I got this little rivet peened back over, glass is in. I tensioned this up, and I just left about a 1/4 of an inch, and that seems to be about the right tension. So with that, we are pretty much complete. Took about an hour to take this thing apart, an hour to paint it. Took about 4 hours to put 2 of these things back together, and tools required were 10 snips to trim off this little felt strip because it was a little ratty on one end, some dikes, just about every punch you own. These are some pretty handy. These are actually little roll pin punches so that they have a round end on them, and I wound up using those to help flatten off some of these rivets. Die grinder to grind the rivets out, some pop rivets, some weather strip adhesive for that fabric, a couple of ball peen hammers. I did go ahead and wind up pop riveting these rivets in here, and they're much stronger than the drive rivets, so that's good. Screwdriver, 9/16, 1/2 inch wrench, drill. Managed not to have every tool in the toolbox out like I normally do, but with that, we're pretty much complete. Everything's repainted, everything's polished up. These seals seem to be fitting very nicely. Had some trouble with some of the ones in the past not wanting to set up right, but this is a pretty nice job. So we got both of them done. Hope you enjoyed this. If you learned something, be sure and subscribe. If you got any questions, leave me a comment. Thank you very much.
Download the Resto-Rat app today to begin managing, tracking, and documenting your restoration project.